basically we've looked at creation and fall, and we've looked at sort of God creating everything, and then man kind of not responding well to that and wanting to be their own God. And then we've walked through of just Adam and Eve, having kids, and Cain and Abel, all the way through Noah. And kind of last week, or not last week, but the week before, we finished up on Noah and the flood and how God, in His mercy and in His grace, continues this idea of having a people. So today I want to do something a little bit different. Can you handle a bit of like, I don't know, not penty, but I need some participation today. Can you participate, or are you going to sit there like just sort of mullets who just like, eh? Like, are we just going to be like lawntarians who are just like, yeah. I need some love today. So one thing Dave Fandy said to me last week, he loved coming out. It was really great. I hope you enjoyed it. It's really great to kind of have like my spiritual dad here for the first time and seeing where we are. And he said, man, those seats are awesome. He's like, they're great. But then your people kind of start doing these ones. And then these ones. And then these ones. No, he didn't. But he's like, man, they're comfy seats. And he's like, I don't know, are people listening or whatever. So today, I need you to participate. So throughout this story, we're going to see a couple things. But in particular, what we're going to look at is that this is kind of like a bit of a story about worship. And so I'm going to ask you some questions throughout different parts of the scenes that we're doing as we go through the story. But one of the questions I'm going to ask is, who do they worship? Do they worship God, or do they worship themselves? And so as we go through the story, I might ask you that question, and I want you to answer that question. So are we going to... What do they live by? Do they live by faith, or do they live by sight? And so when I ask you that question, I want you to answer it, and it's going to be obvious, so that you don't have to feel like, oh no, it's like algebra. I don't even know what that means. Like, what is algebra? Do you remember algebra in school? You're like, oh my goodness, be crazy. So you're going to participate? Please. Okay, so we're going to quickly go through. There are all these sub-stories that I can't get to, so we're going to briefly look at some stuff, but I want to really hit on the main things, and I'm going to take slight detours just to fill you in, but you're going to need to read it, okay? If you want to get all the sub-stories and some characters in there, we can't hit on everything because we're going through the whole Bible in 12 weeks. So basically, after Noah, God reestablished His covenant with Noah. He comes to him and He basically says the same thing. You guys are going to multiply, fill the earth. And then we get to this idea of the story of the Tower of Babel, okay? And so these guys build this city, they build this place where they're not multiplying and going out, they're trying to create the nice, beautiful huddle, okay? Which is something that all Christians love to do. Let's not go out, let's not go further, let's just stay where we're comfortable. And who is that worshiping? Self, okay? Not worshiping God, worshiping self, because they don't want to do things God's ways, okay? So it literally says this, and this will come on the screen. It says, then they said, come, let us build ourselves a city and a tower with its top in the heavens, and let us make a name for ourselves, lest we be dispersed over the face of the whole earth. And so these guys build this city, and their idea of, okay, we're not going to worship God anymore, we're going to worship ourselves. And God literally says, no, you're not. So He basically splits up their languages. Some people start speaking Italian, some people start speaking different ages, some speaking like African languages, and then you got your Kalangarians just going, yeah, it's going, you know. Everyone's different. Guess what they have to do? Scatter. Because now we can't talk to each other. And so God literally says, look, if you're not going to multiply and scatter, I'm going to make you scatter. Love it. God's so good. So that kind of happens, and then we get to the call of Abram, and this is where we're going to really kick off. And so we're going to read from Genesis 12, 1-4. It says, now the Lord said to Abram, go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to the land that I will show you. And I love this. And it says, I will make of you a great nation, and I will bless you and make your name great, so that you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and him who dishonors you I will curse. And in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed. So Abram went as the Lord told him, and Lot went with him. Okay, so God says, hey, don't stay here. Go. Pack up, leave Lawton, pack your bags, and we're heading to that direction. No name, no city, no map, no Google Maps, nothing in a car that's telling you how to get there. And it says he did what? Went. What's he living by? Faith. Okay? He goes, yes. Okay? And he starts on this journey and he goes, I love this. But it's important that we see that he says, in you all the families of the earth will be blessed. Remember, in creation and fall, after Adam and Eve sinned, God actually comes and starts outlining the curse. But one of the parts of the curse, he actually speaks to the serpent. And whilst talking to the serpent, he says that there's going to be a battle between your seed and her seed, being the seed of Eve. And this language shifts. And so all of a sudden he's saying, someone is coming, someone is coming, someone is coming. And the serpent, the enemy, will bruise his heel, but he will crush his head. And so all through this story, you're going to see this idea of seed and family coming through. But it also said, and Lot went with him. And that's important to see. Lot goes with him. Hello. Good? Is that better? Do I just sound like way better? Barry White going on. Hey? Should have seen Jackson walked in this morning. Richard says, hi. Jackson goes, how you going? What a man you are, Jackson. It's crazy. So, Abram believes, he goes, and then literally what we see is that Abram builds an altar for God. Who's he worshiping? And you're going to see this throughout the whole story, that Abram keeps worshiping God. He continues to build an altar for God. All through the story, he stops, he builds an altar, he worships God. Is that cool? 12, 6 to 8. Thank you. All right. You don't have to be too crazy. All right, it says, at that time, this is chapter 12, verse 6 to 8, it says, at that time, the Canaanites were in the land. Then the Lord appeared to Abram and said, to your offspring I will give this land. So he there built an altar to the Lord who appeared to him. From there he moved to the hill country on the cast of Bethel and pitched his tent with Bethel on the west and Ai on the east. And there he built an altar to the Lord and called upon the name of the Lord. You're going to see this throughout the whole story, okay? But then we skip down to verse 12, chapter 12, verse 10. And it says, as he's going down to this land that God's now shown him, he goes to this land and he sees that there's a big famine. And instead of staying in the land where God told him to go, he moves on to Egypt. What's he living by? Sight. God said, go to the land. This is the land. I'm going to give it to you. He goes there and he sees with his eyes, but there's famine. I'll skip to the next town and goes to Egypt. Okay, and he moves on and he goes past it rather than staying there. And what you see when you read the story later on is he has hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of animals. He's got food already in his possession. They've got heaps. So he's living by sight and he doesn't see what God has already given him to provide for him when he gets to this place. And so he moves on to Egypt. And there we see he does a great loving thing with his wife. It says in 12, 11 to 13, it says, and when he was about to enter Egypt, he said to Sarai, his wife, can I just throw this out here, men? Don't ever do this. Like this is dead set, deadbeat, dumb. I know that you are a woman, beautiful in appearance. And when the Egyptians see you, they will say, this is his wife. Then they will kill me. But they will let you live. Yep, that would be good. Say you are my sister, so that it may go well with me because of you, and that my life may be spared for your sake, my love. You don't want to live without me forever, do you? How will you go? How will you live without me? You need me, don't you? Okay, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to pimp you out to these dudes so that you can become their wife. What's he living by? sight. So he lies, and then he gives his wife away to strangers who do not follow God, do not love God, and literally God sends a plague on them to protect her. And then they're like, what happened? And and they literally just send him out, get the heck out of here. And God spares them. But he lives by sight. It's interesting. Faith, sight. Faith, and this is what you see the whole through. Faith, sight. Then we get to the point where him and Lot, they're journeying, they've come out of here, and they're herdsmen, they're workers, they're people who are looking after all the animals, preparing the food, start arguing about, well, we've got too many who's is who's. Well, I can't tell whether that cow's yours, cow, or my cow. I can't tell whether that lamb's yours or mine. Like, there's too many of us. There's too many animals. There's too many of us. And so Abram comes up with the idea of, well, maybe we need to split. Okay? Did God tell Abram to take Lot? No. He said, leave your family and go. But he takes somebody else's family. Lot is his brother's son. He takes his nephew. He takes Jackson. He takes him with him when God didn't tell him to do that. And so they split up, and the Bible literally tells us what Lot does. Abram literally comes to him and says, listen, you take whatever you want. There's heaps here. Let's split. And it says this. It says, and Lot lifted up his eyes and saw. The Jordan Valley was well watered, everywhere like the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt in the direction of Zoar. This was before the Lord had destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. So Lot chose for himself all the Jordan Valley, and Lot journeyed to the east. Thus they separated from each other. While Lot settled among the cities of the valley and moved his tent as far as Sodom. Now the men of Sodom were wicked, great sinners against the Lord. The Lord said to Abram, after Lot had separated from him, lift up your eyes and look from the place where you are, northward and southward, eastward and westward. For all the land that you see I will give to you and to your offspring forever. I will make your offspring as the dust of the earth, so that if one can count the dust of the earth, your offspring also can be counted. Arise, walk through the length and the breadth of the land, for I will give it to you. So Abram moved his tent and came and settled by the oaks of Mamre, which is at Hebron. And there he built an altar to the Lord. Lot, how did he live? By sight. Who did he worship? Abram, how did he live? By faith. And who did he worship? God. So literally, Lot comes all the way over. It says he pitches his tent. So he's got all this land. He pitches his tent right at the top of this hill so that he can peek into this place called Sodom. Where else in the story have we seen somebody's eyes lead them down the wrong path? So far in this story. Eve. Okay, the Bible tells us that Eve, once she saw that the fruit was good and could make her wise, then she ate. And now we're seeing Lot is like, hey, I see this. It looks well watered. It looks like Egypt. This is beautiful. And I'm going to pinch my tent all the way over here so that I am high looking down. And Abram's like, hey, listen, I'm going to trust God with this whole thing. And then I'm going to build an altar to him and worship him. It's important because I think in the story we see the difference, the contrast between the two. The enemy wants to get our eyes onto something other than God. He wants us to look at things that we think we need and think we want that are going to make us happy, rather than trusting and getting our eyes on God and realizing that only Him and His Word can truly satisfy our souls. And this is what we see in the story. Lot pitches his tent. Abram makes an altar to God. And later on we see that Abram has to go and rescue Lot. Lot actually has to get rescued twice. It's crazy. And then in chapter 15 we see that God comes to Abram again and makes this covenant. In chapter 15, 1-6 it says, after these things the word of the Lord came to Abram in a vision. Fear not, Abram, I am your shield. Your reward shall be very great. But Abram said, O Lord God, what will you give me, for I continue childless? And the heir of my house is Eliezer of Damascus. And Abram said, behold, you have given me no offspring, and a member of my household will be my heir. And behold, the word of the Lord came to him, this man shall not be your heir, Live by what? Trust. Trust me. Trust me. Stop living by sight. Trust me. And behold, the word of the Lord came to him, this man shall not be your heir. Your very own son shall be your heir. And he brought him outside and said, look toward heaven and number the stars. If you are able to number them, then he said to him, so shall your offspring be. And there's an important verse, hugely important. It says, and he believed the Lord. What's that living by? Faith. Come on, Penties. You can do it. Hey. Praise God. And he believed the Lord. I need a handkerchief to start wiping my sweat. Hallelujah. He believed the Lord. He put his trust in God. He had faith in God. And God, he counted it to him as righteousness. He had faith. He trusted God. He trusted God. Faith. Paul looks at this in the New Testament. It's not his works. It's his faith. It's his trust in God. And God says, I'm going to count it. That literally means imputed, that God actually puts on him his righteousness. It's crazy. It's insane to me. So God then gives him instructions. He tells him, go and get 3 animals of this and 3 of this animals and 3 of this animals. And then he goes and does all this stuff because God's going to make this covenant. They're going to have this moment together. And literally, Abram falls asleep. And God starts saying to him, this is the covenant I make with you. This is the covenant I make with you. Ladies, hands up. How many of you, when your husband's sitting there watching TV, and you're like, this is what's happening, and this is what needs... How many of you think that goes in? Like, hands up. Is any of you ever just like, deadbeat husband, when he's in like TV mode... See, all these wives are so godly. They're like, how dare I emasculate my man in church? I honor him at all times. I honor him and I submit to him and I respect him. I will not bring him down. Oh, but it is so true because deep inside in your heart, you know that this is true and it frustrates the absolute crap out of you. That when you talk to your husband, only one function is currently working and that is the eye function and the ear function is completely shut down. Correct? All right? So... God makes this covenant with a dude who's not just watching TV, he's asleep. Abram is not involved in this covenant. Abram hasn't gone, yeah, no worries, that's a sweet deal. God's like, this is what's going to happen. These people are going to come here and do this. I'm going to do this. And then literally, how they would do it is that the animals get cut in half. And the way that a covenant would normally be made is 2 people, they'd split animal on either side, and 2 people would walk through to say that this is what it's going to be like for us if we break our covenant. And 2 people make this commitment, this mutual commitment to go through. Abram is asleep and God says, it's not about you. I'm making this covenant. I will. Splits the animals. He walks through and Abram's like, because there are different covenants in the Bible. Some covenants are 2-way. Marriage is 2-way. This covenant is 1-way. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. It's important that we see that. And then we get this impatient plan from Sarai. Chapter 16, verse 1, it says, now Sarai, Abram's wife, had borne him no children. It's been a while. Been a long while. Years are going past now where they're trying to get pregnant every month and it's just not happening. And they're trying and he's getting older. And she's getting older. I remember when we started having kids, my wife's like, man, if I don't have 12,000 children before I'm 30, this sucker's gone. This is drying up. You need to hurry and get this thing going because I'm dying here. I'm getting old. This thing is going to just be shutting shop on us. Okay, she ain't 30, she's over 65. And they're still trying, They don't have IVF. They don't have any medical stuff to help them. They're trying. And every month that she doesn't get pregnant, and some of you women have experienced this, it's disappointing. Because God said there would be something that would come from us, and it's not happening. Abram, are you a man or are you not a man? beautiful thing when your wife gets pregnant because you're like, oh, I'm a man. This can continue on. And she's hitting him up and she's nagging him and nagging him and nagging him. And now, listen, nagging's a problem for men. It's that much of a problem that I literally put a verse on the back of my wife's iPad that I bought her for Christmas about a nagging wife is like a dripping tap. I let her know that. I got that engraved on the back of this. Just to remind her that you don't nag, okay? You don't nag. It's a personal joke. That's why things are going well for me at the moment. The joke is my wife never nags, but she nagged me about an iPad. So, okay, just so you know, you're like, we knew you were bad. You are the worst husband in the world. So she's nagging him, she's nagging him, she's nagging him. And Sarai said to Abram, behold now, the Lord has prevented me from bearing children. Go into my servant. It may be that I shall not obtain children by her. And Abram listened to the voice of Sarai. So after Abram had lived 10 years in the land of Canaan, Sarai, Abram's wife, took Hagar the Egyptian, her servant, and gave her to Abram, her husband, as a wife. So for 10 years she nagged him. For 10 years. Just do it with her. Just do it with her. Like, it's not happening. Give it a crack. This is our only option. 10 years. And then he folded. Because he just couldn't handle the nag anymore. Men. Where else in this story has it gone bad because a man did not lead his wife? Adam. We often blame the wife. We often blame Eve because she ate first. But the Bible tells us that Adam was sitting right next to her doing diddly squat. And the instruction was not ever given to Eve. The instruction was given to Adam. It was Adam's responsibility to protect his wife. And he should have got that serpent's head and crushed it. But he did not. And here again, this is not on Sarai, this is on Abram. Because Abram should have said, God has said, we do not live by, we live by, we do not worship, we worship, and he did not. So he listens to her. Gets her pregnant, it says, and he went into Hagar and she conceived, and when she saw, he's talking about Sarai, that she had conceived, she looked with contempt on her mistress. And Sarai said to Abram, may the wrong done to me be on you. Oh, that's pretty funny. I gave my servant to your embrace, and when she saw that she had conceived, she looked on me with contempt. How funny is it when we interpret how people are treating us, it's actually a reflection of what's going on in our own heart. She had contempt on Hagar. It says nothing about Hagar having contempt on her, but because that's how she's feeling, she now interprets what Hagar is doing as being the very thing that she feels towards Hagar. Do you see that? How often do we do that? We just interpret and receive information based on actually how we're feeling. God doesn't love me. Why not? Because I'm feeling this and I'm experiencing this, so I'm going to interpret it this way. So it goes bad. How was Abram living? By sight. We then see God reestablish his covenant with Abram. How good is God? Like literally, if you read from chapter 12 to 21, you're going to see that God just keeps saying the same thing. Hey. I know I've said it 1,000 times. I'm going to say it again. This is what we're going to do. This is how many kids you're going to have. Will you believe? So God reestablishes covenant again because he's good. He comes to Abram and he says, hey, this is how it's going to go. And then he adds a piece to the covenant. He says, but here's what you're going to do. You're going to circumcise all the males on the 8th day. And Abram sort of kind of goes to God, goes, what about rainbow? Can we do a rainbow deal? Do I have any negotiation ability here at all? Because now I've got a rainbow and we're getting circumcision deals. Okay? Literally. He has this conversation with God and he goes and gets his son and all the men and goes and circumcises them. Don't want to get too graphic. I'll leave that with you. Here's the deal. It is costly to follow God. It sometimes hurts to worship God. Sometimes it's painful to live by faith. It's hard. It's costly, but it's worth it. Because he promises what he will do, and he will do what he will always do. Because so far in the story, every time God has said, it has come to pass. And when God says this will, it means it will. But it's costly. So God promises. It says that Abram laughed because now he's like 75. He's like, Abram tries to negotiate and says, well, what about Hagar's kid Ishmael? Can we just make that the deal? And God's like, no, that's not what I said. Ishmael's not the deal. In between here, we see that Lot has moved all the way into Sodom and Gomorrah. He pimps out his 2 girls. It's a terrible story. You can go and read it. There's just destruction and death and just evil. And God graciously and mercifully rescues Lot, which is crazy. And then we get to Genesis 21 where we see the promise fulfilled. The Lord visited Sarah, as he had said. There's a bit I missed in here. God changes Abram's name to Abraham, which means a father of many nations. So in that re-establishment of covenant, he gives him a new name, new identity. This is who you are. Why? Because I say that's who you are, and I'm going to bring that about into your life. Okay? He changes Sarai's name to Sarah. We all up to scratch? Yeah, good. Okay. All right, so the Lord visited Sarah, and as he had said, as the Lord did to Sarah, as he had promised. And Sarah conceived and bore Abraham a son in his old age at that time which God had spoken to him. Abraham called the name of his son who was born to him, whom Sarah bore him, Isaac. And Abraham circumcised his son Isaac when he was 8 days old. Who's he worshipping? God. As soon as this son is born, he's like, on the 8th day, done. Who's leading the family? Abraham. Is Sarah leading the family? No. Abraham is saying, God is talking to me. God is holding me responsible. I'm going to do this. It's important. And look at this. It says, Abraham was 100 years old. 75 to 100 years old. Do your math. How many years of? 25 years. 25 years of God said this is going to happen. I hate that God is patient. I hate that God doesn't live in time. Because 25 years to God is a blink, right? But to us, it's 25 flippin' years. That's 24 hours, 7 days a week, 52 weeks a year for 25 years. I can't conceive. I can't conceive. What's wrong with you? What's wrong with you? Slap. You're useless. You're useless. Sleep with her. Sleep with her. Sleep with her. Sleep with... now I hate her. I hate her, son. I get rid of her. This is because of you. This is because of you. Right? This is what's been going on. And he's sitting there going, am I a man? Can I do this? Will I trust? Will I trust? This isn't working. How do I deal with it? She's going crazy. She's got estrogen levels going through the roof. She's taken every pill there is. She's taken everything. We've gone through everything. It's still not working. 25 years. But God said. And when God said, let there be light, there was. That's how it rolls with God. When I say, it is. So I love this. It says Abram was 100 years old when his son Isaac was born to him. And Sarah said, God has made laughter for me. Do you remember how they responded when God said this is going to happen? They laughed. Both of them laugh. They laugh at God. Later on, we see Ishmael's laughing at them. Like, laughter is all through this story. I can't bring it out that well, but it's all through the story. And now this laughter has turned from a sarcastic, unbelieving laugh to this laugh of worship. Like, are you kidding me? Can you imagine just holding this kid and going, all these years? And people are looking at us and going, you're too old. You're too old. We don't even know if you can do what needs to be done to have kids. You're that old. Right? You're 100. My wife was going nuts at 30. It's crazy. Everyone who hears will laugh over him. And she said, who would have said to Abram that Sarah would nurse child, yet I have borne him a son in his old age. It's awesome, eh? So all these years, all the struggle, promise fulfilled. Now, quick question, just side question. If on the first month after God first said that this was going to happen and they conceived and had a kid, what level of their worship do you think that would have been at if that happened that soon compared to the 25 years? Do you think the tension, the up and down, the journey has led to a different level of worship, a different level of thankfulness, a different level of surrender, a different level of trust than if it happened in the first time they tried to have a baby? So just maybe, just somehow, just weird thought, maybe it was good for them to have gone through that. Hands up who thinks that could be the case. Like that was actually good for them. Therefore, could it be good for us? Exactly. No. The answer is no. Well, then we get to the test. In chapter 22, after all this, and they get this promise, and the promise comes, and they're laughing, and they're rejoicing, and they're celebrating, then God says, let's see. It says, after these things, we don't know how long that is. We don't know exactly. We make assumptions and we kind of make rough estimates based on what Isaac does in the story. Most people put Isaac probably in his late teens, early 20s. Okay, but it's not absolutely 100% clear. But just because of the amount of wood he kind of carries and stuff like that. But we don't know. But let's just say 20 years, right? We got Poe and Hannah down the back and they're like, ooh, Nina's so beautiful. Nina, all that for all the years. Watch it. He's such a godly boy. He's such a godly man, and we're so proud of him for 20 years. He's passing all his grades. He's jock of the school. He's everything. And God says, after these things, God tested Abraham and said to him, Abraham. I love their language. He's Yoda. Here am I. He said, take your son, your only son Isaac, whom you love, and go to the land of Moriah and offer him there as a burnt offering. That's where you go. What you talking about, Willis? What you talking about? All of those of you under 30 have no idea. That's fine. And offer him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains which I shall tell you. So Abraham rose early in the morning, saddled his donkey, and took his 2 younger men with him and his son Isaac. How's he living? By faith. It's crazy. He took his son Isaac and he cut the wood for the burnt offering and arose and went to the place of which God had told him. On the 3rd day, Abraham lifted up his eyes and saw the place from afar. Then Abraham said to his young men, stay here with the donkey. I and the boy will go over there and worship. I don't think he's just saying that to them to make them think nothing's happening. I think he's actually going over there to worship. We are going over here and we are going to worship. It's insane to me. And come again to you. So we are going to go worship and then we are going to come again to you. All right? It's important that you see that in the story. And Abram took the wood of the burnt offering and laid it on Isaac his son. And he took in his hand the fire and the knife, so they went both of them together. And Isaac said to his father Abraham, my father. And he said, here am I, my son. Sorry, these are just funny things to me. And he said, behold the fire and the wood, but where is the lamb for a burnt offering? Abram said, God will provide for himself the lamb for a burnt offering, my son. So they went, both of them together. And when they came to the place of which God had told him, Abraham built the altar there and laid wood in order and bound Isaac his son and laid him on the altar on top of the wood. Can you imagine me and Isaac? Like, what the heck, man? Now listen, I've wanted to kill my kids at times, okay? But there's a level of that which is just like this crazy emotional moment where, but you're not really serious about doing it. You love them. You'd never, okay. Now all you people are looking at me and judging me going, man, you're the worst husband in the world. You're the worst father in the world. How the heck has God made you a pastor? And it's called grace, people. But there are times when you are frustrated and you're like, I don't want to be with you. You annoy me. You frustrate me. Just, your mind goes insane. But you'd never heard them like that, would you? Ever. So you go for a walk. You breathe. And then you let some prayer out. With love and stuff. Anyway, let's back to the story. So when they came to the place which God, he put the wood on him, bound Isaac his son, laid him on the altar, and says, then Abraham reached out his hand and took the knife to slaughter his son. To slaughter his son. But the angel of the Lord called to him from heaven and said, Abraham, Abraham. He said, here am I. He said, do not lay your hand on the boy or do anything to him. What does it say next? For now I know that you fear God, seeing you have not withheld your son, your only son, from me. And Abraham lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, behind him was a ram, caught in a thicket by his horns. And Abraham went and took the ram and offered it up as a burnt offering instead of his son. So Abraham called the name of that place, the Lord will provide. As it is said to this day, on the mountain of the Lord it shall be provided. How did Abraham live? By faith. Why did God test him? What did it say? After, when he's about to slaughter his son, and God, the angel calls to him, it says, don't touch the boy, for now what? What's that? Worship. For now I know that you worship me above everything. Above everything, including your kid, the promised kid who you have struggled and struggled and struggled and struggled and struggled for 25 years to have, and people mocked you and people gave you heaps and said, it can't be done, don't follow this God, don't listen to this God, and then you get that kid, and then I needed to make sure that that kid was not your God. That you did not put your faith, your hope, your life into that kid as if that kid can do anything for you. That's what God's saying. Because that kid is not the fulfillment of the promise. He's pointing to the fulfillment of the promise. Do you see? God doesn't want Abraham to think Isaac is the one holding the cards. This is the story of God. God has chosen Adam. God has chosen Noah. God has chosen Abraham. And God's now choosing Isaac. But it's not about Isaac. Isaac's not the deal. Isaac's pointing to the deal. So he's saying, will Isaac be the object of your worship? Will your life revolve around this boy? Or will I be the object of your worship? Will your faith be in Isaac and his ability to fulfill the promise? Or will you see that Isaac is pointing to the fulfillment of the promise? The promise is through Abram's seed. It's through the seed that's going to continue to go on and go on and go on, which is going to prove that God is God. Because it just keeps somehow happening. Isaac is pointing us to something, to someone. Someone who will be an only son and who will obey the Father and get on that altar. How many of you would have tried to slap your dad, try to get your hands off me? He's not a small boy, so he's got strength. He's carrying wood, so he could have been disobedient and said, what the heck? But he was obedient, and that's a picture to someone who's coming, who's going to be obedient to the Father and get on that altar and lay down his life and be purely because he wants to be obedient to his dad. It points us to a Father who will not withhold his Son, his only Son, whom he loves. And ultimately, that God will provide a way for us to escape so that we can get off that altar of death and experience freedom and life, because he will provide a sacrificial lamb that will come and take our place from being on that altar of death. This whole story is pointing to something, someone, something, someone, something, someone that is coming. And God needs Abraham to know that so that he can look forward and put his faith in that moment, not in his son. And now the question for us is, where is our faith? Are we living by sight? Or do we live by faith? Do we worship self? Do we worship us? Or do we worship God? And this story, all the way through, is pointing to us forward to a cross, which now we look back to a cross that says, this is your God. This is what he's done for you. Will you trust him? Because it's really easy for us to trust the whole sin thing for some reason, but not everything else, right? That's great, but I'm in a mess right now, and I don't see a way of escape. I can't get my head out of this deal here. It's hang on, whoa. Lift up your eyes. Who is God? What has he done to show you that he loves you? Because he did not withhold his son, his only son, whom he loved. And Jesus obeyed his Father to the point of death so that you and I could experience resurrection life now and forever and walk with God. As the band come up, my favorite scripture at the moment, it's kind of been, there's been a few, Lamentations 3:22, which talks about God's mercies being new every day. It's been a big one for me in the past year of just, I literally have a reminder on my phone every day where that verse comes up. And so I read Lamentations 3:22, 23, pretty much every day. Just read it, just reminding myself, his mercies are new every day. They're unending. But another verse that has stuck for me is Galatians 2:20. And Galatians 2:20 is a scripture that Paul writes talking about the life that we now live as Christians. And it says in there, it says that, for I've been crucified with Christ. It is no longer I who live, but Christ who lives in me. And the life I now live in the flesh, this life that I live as a Christian, this life that I live on this earth, I live by faith in the Son of God who loved me and gave himself for me. I want to encourage you through this story that this is a story about God and his work, his plan of redemption that he is going to bring about. And he keeps promising and promising and covenanting and covenanting. And all God is saying from our end is, trust me. Worship will cost you. Faith will cost you. It will hurt. But will you trust? Put your faith in me, in my word, because what I said is how it's going to happen. And some of you doubt. Satan talks to you. He tells you lies. And I want to encourage you today as we come and take communion. Put your faith in God today. Just say, God, I need to trust you today. I want to put my faith in you for everything. Not just my sin, but my sin, my family, my money, my work, my whole life I want to give to you. And here's one of the promises. The promises for us means that when you give your life away to God, you actually gain it. That's actually where you find your life. I was at a party last night. I was talking to a couple who the husband does not want to have kids. I hate kids, blah, blah. And we're having a chat. And I just said to him, here's the thing about kids, is that often when we have kids, we think that they would take our life away. But it's actually after you have kids, that's actually where you find your life. And you realize that the most joyful thing in your life is to actually give it away to someone else. But you don't actually have to have kids to experience that. You can do that now with your life and just give it to Jesus. You will experience eternal resurrection life that will still be painful, but you will reap this thing inside of you that says, I am right with my Maker. That I walk with God. I can talk with God. I'm free from guilt and shame for the rest of my life. We should be the freest people on the earth because we don't have a past that holds us and grips us. We have a past which has been defeated. So this morning we're going to worship. And our worship wasn't great this morning. Let's just be honest. We've got a lot of people in this room who are going through stuff. But how about we finish and make it worship be good? Let's worship from here. Let's bring our crap. Let's bring our stuff to the altar and say, God, we're here at this valley and we're going to make an altar to you. And we're going to worship you. Why? Because of what you did. And we're going to put our faith in the Son of God who loved us, who gave himself for us. So come on, why don't we stand? As the band sing, we're going to take communion. And I just want to encourage you, think about worship and faith. And let us worship God. Let's put our faith. Let's not let this just become a ritual that we do every week. And we take communion. Let's come and say, man, you've done this for me. I want to trust you. And it's an act of faith. It's an act of trust. It's an act of receiving and putting our faith in Jesus, saying, you have done this. It's only by your grace and through our faith. Let's trust and then let's worship. Let's give honor to our King.